Ryan, did you hear the good news? Doug Ford won. Yes, and that's why we need to change how elections are done in Ontario. Hi, I'm Ryan F. Gassian, and in this video, I'm going to talk about how dysfunctional Ontario's electoral system is. We Ontarians smugly think we are better than the Americans, that our electoral system is somehow superior. It is true Donald Trump was elected president, even though Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes. On the other hand, Trump won with a greater percentage of the vote than Doug Ford, who as of June 7, 2018, is Premier of Ontario. Who are we to judge? Now, I'm not going to talk about Ford's personality or politics in this video. I would never have voted for the man, yet clearly many Ontarians would. Otherwise he wouldn't have won. That's democracy for you. Sometimes the other side wins, and you just have to accept that. No, my problem isn't that he won. Ford has earned the right to lead Ontario. My problem is that he got a majority. Ford's Progressive Conservative Party won with 40.64% of the vote and was rewarded 76 seats. But there are only 124 seats in the Assembly, and you need 63 seats to form a majority. I'm no math whiz, but I do know how to operate a calculator. 76 out of 124 works out to 61.29%. Yet the PCs only got 40.64% of the vote. This is hardly fair, but before we get outraged, let's see how the other parties fared. The runner-up was my choice, the NDP. They got 40 seats with 33.69%. Okay, that seems reasonable, given that 40 out of 124 is 32.25%. What about the Liberals? Well, they got 7 seats, even though they took in 19.30% of the vote. While I won't share a tear for them, the Liberals brought this on themselves. But if our elections were remotely fair, they should have been awarded 23 seats. The Green Party did worse, or better depending on your point of view. They picked up 1 seat. With 4.52%, they should have gotten 5 seats. But given that they had 0 seats coming in, they probably saw it as a win. Now, let's imagine a voting system where we reward seats based on the percentage of votes won. The PCs would have been bequeathed 50 seats instead of the 76. The NDP would have picked up 41 seats, the Liberals 23, and the Green Party 5. Ford would still be the Premier of Ontario. Again, he has earned the right to lead, but his Progressive Conservatives would have been 12 seats shy of a majority. This is not just a problem with Ontario's election system, but with all of Canada. In the 2015 Canadian election, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau won a majority with 39.47% and was rewarded 183 seats. You only need 170 seats to form a majority. With 39.47% of the vote, Trudeau should have gotten 133 seats. The Conservative Party would have gotten 107 seats instead of 96. The NDP 64 instead of 44, the Bloc Québécois 15 instead of 10, and the Green Party 11 instead of 1. Trudeau would still be Prime Minister, but he would have had 37 seats short of a majority. This process is not only unfair, but toxic to the health of Canada's democracy. Election turnout has been going down over the decades. For all of Canada, it was as high as 79.2% in 1963, though since 1993, it has never gone higher than 96.6%. In Ontario this year, turnout was a dismal 58.4%. There are many factors that explain why voter turnout has gone down, but one contributing factor is that in some ridings, electorates know their vote don't matter. The reason our election results are so skewed is because we Canadians use a first-past-the-post system, or FPTP for short. Every seat represents a riding, or what in the United States would be called a district. To win, you just need to get more votes than the other candidates. Theoretically, if you got 3% of the vote, but there were 50 other candidates in the race, and they all got less than 3%, you would be the winner, even though 97% of all voters picked someone other than you. This is an extreme, but it perfectly highlights just how stupid our system is. But remember, it gets even worse. Unlike in the United States, where Americans vote for their congresspersons, presidents, and governors in separate elections, in Canada, the party that wins the most seats gets to pick the Prime Minister, or Premier. Only the citizens of Etobicoke North voted for Ford. He is Premier because he leads the Progressive Conservatives, and they got the most seats. Now, Ontarians might have voted for or against Ford indirectly, in that they chose a representative based on whether or not he or she was Progressive Conservative. But in the end, they were voting for their riding's candidate. For a lot of constituents, FPTP means that their votes don't count. If you live in a Progressive Conservative riding, well, it doesn't matter if you vote NDP because the NDP has no chance of winning, and thus affecting the election. It would make more sense for you to vote Liberal, since they might have a chance of beating the Progressive Conservative candidate. The reverse is true if you are a Progressive Conservative living in the NDP riding. If you want to stop the NDP, you're going to have to vote Liberal. But if you do, you will be hurting your party's chances of winning the next election. You see, in Canada, we have two ways of funding our elections. The first is through individual donations. They make up about 62.4% of revenue candidates take in to run their campaigns. The rest comes from the government. These subsidies are based on how many votes a party gets in the last election. So, if you are a Green living in Progressive Conservative riding, you might want to vote Liberal. But if you do, the money that would have gone to the Green Party will go to the Liberals instead. This system is hardly democratic, favoring larger, more established parties like the Liberals or the Progressive Conservatives over smaller ones like the NDPs or the Greens. So, while it might seem on paper that we Canadians have more choices than Americans, in truth, we don't. There is a Green Party and Libertarian Party in the US, but did you see them during the Hillary-Trump debates? Nope. The Green Party of Canada was invited into the 2015 debates. But did that make a difference? Not really. They got 1 seat out of 11 seats they should have picked up. Clearly, our electoral system needs to be reformed. There are several options to choose from. The most popular alternative to FPTP, and the one most used around the world, is proportional representation. In proportional representation, we get rid of ridings and instead have parties rank their candidates by preference. The electorate then votes for the parties, and the number of seats they get is determined by the percentage of votes. So, in Ontario, if this system had already been implemented, the Progressive Conservatives would have had 50 seats instead of 76. Ford would then go to his party's list and pick the first 49 candidates to fill out those seats. Granted, this system has its problems, like how it gets rid of ridings, and thus distances politicians from the people they're representing. An alternative to proportional representation, and the one I most favor, is the ranked ballot. Here, ridings remain, and voters rank the candidates. Voters' first picks are counted, and if no candidate gets more than 50% plus 1, then the candidates with the least amount of votes are discarded, and the second picks are counted with the first. This process is repeated until one candidate gets 50% plus 1. This ensures that a plurality of voters, even if they don't get their first pick, will get someone they're comfortable with rather than someone they loathe. This system would also solve the problem with our campaign financing laws. We could set it up so we reward money based on first ballot picks. For example, let's say that you are green, but you live in a riding that traditionally votes conservative. You can choose green as your first pick, knowing that you can still vote strategically with your second and third picks, be they Liberal or NDP. The money would still go to the Green Party because they were your first pick. There are other voting systems out there, including single transferable vote and mixed member proportional. During the 2015 election, Prime Minister Trudeau talked about electoral reform, though he was vague, suggesting that it should be studied, and after winning, discarding the idea. This is why I get mad when people call Justin a progressive or compare him to his father. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the greatest prime minister in Canadian history, and that includes John A. Macdonald, had a clear vision, having once said, and I quote, "I am convinced Canada needs a system of proportional representation if the federal government is going to be able to identify itself with the whole country." Now, Pierre did not achieve his dream, but he can be forgiven because he gave us a written constitution and the Bill of Rights. He made multiculturalism and bilingualism the official position of the Canadian government. He passed the Criminal Law Amendment Act, which decriminalized homosexuality, allowed for abortions, and made it legal for women to buy contraceptions. During the 1970 October crisis, he prevented Canada from descending into civil war. Pierre wasn't pretending to be a progressive like his son. He was a living embodiment of progressivism in Canada. To be sure, he had his flaws. But what has Justin done in his time as Prime Minister? Other than legalizing marijuana, he's gone back on every other promise he's made. Be it throwing the Indigenous people under the bus when he championed the Trans Mountain Pipeline, or abandoning electoral reform. The truth is that the Liberals of this era aren't interested in changing the status quo. It might play well during elections, but once in power, they drop it from the agenda. Former Liberal Prime Minister John Chrétien admitted as much when he said that proportional representation is great for unelectable professors. That disbanding FPTP would allow political hacks and party insiders to enter Parliament through the back door via party lists. That is a problem with proportional representation. But then again, both Justin and Ford got majority governments with 2/5 of the vote. That is partly why I prefer ranked ballot systems, because it maintains the geographical bond between representatives and constituents, while ensuring that elected officials must still get half the votes before they are declared the winner. But even if we do go with proportional representation, there is plenty of evidence that it won't bust our democracy. Germany, Finland, Ireland, the Netherlands, and Norway and Sweden use a form of proportional representation. No one would call them failed democracies. You must ask yourself, do those who oppose electoral reform do so because they think it is folly? Or because they fear that if all votes were counted, they would start losing elections? Thank you for listening, and please help my channel by liking this video and subscribing. Oh, and visit my website at www.darknessinamerica.com to read my short stories about a future United States where people live in fear of inquisitors, telepathic assassins who police the populace for thought crimes.